За конференцтэй эргээд тавтамаар л манай mnNOG3 конференцийн техникийн сешн эхлэхэд бэлэн боллоо. Өнөөдөр бид та бүхэндээ маш сонирхолтой 4 илтгэлүүд танилцуулахаар бэлтгэсэн байгаа. Манай эхний илтгэгч бол Geoff Huston, mnNOG3 Chief Scientist. Geoff өнөөдөр бидэнд Монгол улс дахь IP технологийн нэвтрүүлэх гэсэн сэдвээр ярих байгаа. Okay, welcome back everyone. Hope everyone enjoyed the break. Now let's start the technical session. We have prepared 4 presentations. And our first speaker is mnNOG Chief Scientist Geoff Huston. He'll talk about IP technology adoption in Mongolia. Over to you, Geoff.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I must apologise to start with that I don't speak Mongolian. So at best, you'll have to put up with me speaking English, if that's okay. Can everyone see my slides? I assume so. So what I want to speak about this afternoon is technology adoption in Mongolia. And it's not just IP. I actually want to talk about the more recent technologies that have come out, well, when I say recent, the last 20 years. IPv6 is certainly not recent, but DNSSEC, about 10 years old, and similarly routing security. Now, interestingly, Mongolia has a really high adoption rate of validating DNS answers using DNS security. Really high. It's great. And in terms of routing security, there is a lot of signed route origination attestations and a relatively good rate of using those security credentials to drop invalid routing objects. This is excellent. But I heard from Philip Smith that the topic of V6, which of all these technologies is the oldest, the adoption rate is the worst. No V6, none. Now, you're not unusual. You're not unusual. If we look around at other countries, Bhutan, for example, has high rate of use of DNSSEC, great rate of signing route origin attestations, and a decent amount of filtering invalid routing objects. And again, not much V6. What about further afield? Well, Sweden. Well, high DNSSEC, not much V6. But interestingly, Sweden never really got into signing ROAs. It's just not something the Swedes do. But oddly enough, they're really good at filtering. Okay. Brazil, good DNSSEC, decent cut at V6. No routing security to speak of. None. Spain, great rate of ROA signing, but nothing else. These differences are curious. India is the world's largest V6 country. V6 is huge, thanks basically to Reliance Jio. Also, Reliance Jio was very big on using DNS security, so DNSSEC is great. As for routing security, in India, I like decent ROA signing, but no filtering. And how about the US? Well, DNSSEC, not so keen. V6, well, it's not brilliant, it's okay. ROA signing, again, it's okay. Filtering, no. So this kind of unequalness is certainly not unusual around the world. And Mongolia's profile of 3 out of 4 is okay. I'm like, you know, V6 could be better, but it's okay. But I think there are some lessons that we can all learn and look at these and kind of wonder why. You know, I don't know about you, but I've just upgraded iOS to whatever the current version is. It's at 15, and my Mac systems are busy being upgraded to Monterey right now, and so are yours. If you have Windows, it's Windows 11 time. Our technology as clients, as users, is the same worldwide. And whether you own a Samsung with an Android operating system, an Apple with iPhone, no matter what you have, we're all at the same technology base. And in terms of our routing equipment and other pieces of infrastructure, none of you, hopefully, run 10-year-old software or 10-year-old technology. It's bug-ridden and can be taken over by bad people really easily. So all of us keep our equipment roughly up to date. And so our technology bases are similar. We all buy from the same small set of vendors. And as far as I'm aware, you know, a router, a switch, a platform, a computing platform costs the same the world over. Our supply costs are much the same. Now, yes, we all have a different sort of consumer wealth indicator. The gross domestic product, the GDP per capita, varies widely across these economies. That's true. But nevertheless, despite that, despite having the same technology and slightly different wealth, there are different technology deployment models. And I suppose you could say, well, is V6 only for rich countries? Well, no, India. India is not a rich country in terms of per capita, heaps of V6. And how about those other ones like Sweden, relatively rich country, not much in the way of V6, not much in the way of rower signing. And the US, again, a rich country, DNSSEC, yeah. So it's not being able to afford the technology. Cost has nothing to do with this. Let's drill down a little bit. And I want to talk about each of these three technologies in a little more detail. Let's talk about V6. At APNIC, I conduct the world's largest measurement system. We use Google Ads, and thank you for having ads on your screen. I do appreciate it, because around 12 million times every day, the ad that Google displays is mine. And it says, hi, we're APNIC, thanks for helping us. And what that ad does is measure you or your device and how good it is at performing a few basic tasks. And one of those tasks is to get a one-by-one web object, tiny, but use only V6. If you haven't got V6, it doesn't work. We use a unique URL, so it always comes back to us and we can see. And so today, or in fact, just a few days ago, around 28%, a little under 1/3 of the internet's users have V6. This graph spans from 2014 until yesterday. So we're about 7 years in. In 2014, I was hearing all these wonderful claims about how much V6 there was. In reality, in 2014, there was very, very little. We're now up to around 1/3. But where is it? Is it 1/3 of everywhere? Well, no, not really. In Europe, the number's a little lower. It's around 22 or 23%. But this map is, I suppose, even more informative. The greener it is, the more V6. The redder it is, the less. So Germany, Belgium, Greece, really good. The UK, Portugal, I was going to say the Slovak Republic, but I'm wrong. It's the one that's south of there. No, you've got me. I think it's Romania. No, it's not. Moldova, maybe. Lots in that sort of Central and Northern Europe, but Spain, but Italy, but Sweden, Iceland, very little. Extremely diverse. So Europe, which in many ways is quite homogeneous, has great differences. What about Asia? Well, India, gangbusters, absolutely. Reliance Jio, when they rolled it out, forced the other 4 mobile operators to roll it out, and they did. China has been struggling. It's been struggling for over 3 years. Their outcome is still relatively low. Japan, which was a really early adopter of V6, They had a V6 program 20 years ago, one of the first in the world. These days, it's pretty mediocre. It just hasn't got very far. There's actually better penetration in Malaysia or Vietnam. And there's Mongolia. Yes, it's coloured red. Saudi Arabia is doing a lot better. So lots of diversity in V6. What do we see when we look at the levels of validation of DNS answers, the use of DNS security? Well, oddly enough, and this is coincidental, completely coincidental, the amount of users out there who will not resolve a name if the DNS signature says bad, someone's tampering, is about the same as V6 globally. Around 20% of the internet's users sit behind DNS resolvers, where if DNSSEC, security for the DNS, says that's not the right answer, that's wrong, don't go there. They go, right, no DNS answer, we're not going to go there. So about the same. It started in 2014, or my measurement started, and at the time, DNSSEC was almost 10 times more prevalent than V6, just a little under 10%, whereas V6 was struggling to get to 1. So in some ways, the story of DNSSEC adoption is oddly enough slower. And that's a very, very odd dip at around 2018. Why did folk turn it off? For those of you who live and breathe the DNS, and as a fellow DNS person, welcome. You might remember the great KSK role that the IANA performed in this time. And oddly enough, when we tried to roll the trust anchor of the DNS, which was a terribly difficult process, we scared a whole bunch of service providers who across that key role said, look, I'm just going to turn this off until you get it back together again. I'll shut my eyes, and when I open them again sometime in 2019, hopefully you've done it all. That's why that dip. Europe, 35%, slightly ahead of the world. And a map. Now, it's a different map. Sweden, Finland, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, all the Scandies are going, we love DNS security. It's just wonderful. And over here, I think that's Czechia, the Czech Republic, totally. The UK, yeah, not so. Spain, Italy, Greece, big in V6, indifferent about DNS security. Weird, but diversity. What about Asia? Well, again, it's kind of tracking the rest of the world at around 25%. It's very steady across this entire COVID blighted period in the last year and a half, at around 22%. Who's doing DNSSEC? The Saudis are big. The Saudis outsource their DNS to Akamai these days, and I think Akamai does it for them. India, really big in DNS security. Mongolia, yeah, so-so. It's not green, but it's so-so. China, definitely a big no. So again, huge variation. And last and not least, let me look at routing security. And there's two parts to routing security. You've got to create these credentials, these digital signatures in order to validate routing objects. And then you've got to validate those routing objects against what you see in BGP and drop the bad ones. So validating doesn't work until you also drop invalids. So again, let's have a look at some numbers here. Now, it's been around for a lot less time. So rather than giving you 7 years, I could really only give you a little over a year. And this graph starts from the middle of last year. And what I'm looking at here is the percentage of users across the entire internet that will not go to a destination if the only way to get there follows a route that is invalid. Now, just to be sneaky and difficult, there isn't just one location. I am using these days, like everyone else, a content distribution network to actually spread the targets. And so if there's any way to get there through this CDN, you'll go there. I'd made that change, as is obvious, at the start of this year. And for a while, my measurement system was showing an unduly optimistic 35%. The reality wasn't that. It was a lot lower. And when I turned on the content distribution network, it dropped to a more realistic 10% of users. These days, it's 15%, and the number really hasn't changed. Only 15% of users will not go to a destination if the route is bad. If you can pull off a routing security attack, 85% of the world will follow your bad route. That's terrible. How about Europe? Well, about the same as the world, about 15%. Picture? Well, not all the Scandinavians. Norway's big on this in terms of dropping invalids, and Sweden's pretty big on it. Oh, and the Faroe Islands, all 10 sheep. And that's about it for big. The rest of Europe, maybe Portugal, not so enthusiastic. Portugal and Estonia come in next. But again, high variation, isn't it? What about Asia? World, 15%, Asia, around 10%. Who's big? Not the Saudis. Not really Mongolia. Bhutan's sort of getting there. Who's really big? Syria, Japan, Taiwan. My geography's terrible. I'm going to go Uzbekistan. And if I'm wrong, I don't know. Kazakhstan? No, I think it's Uzbekistan. Very varied picture. So let's just compare those maps that we've looked at globally. V6, huge in India, big in Germany, relatively big in Finland, US, and the other picture, sort of spotty. Brazil's big, but the rest of South America, not so. DNSSEC, it's a different map. Africa now sees a fair deal of DNSSEC, security in the DNS. The Scandinavian countries see it. And of course, we mentioned the Saudis. Australia, nah, we don't do that. New Zealand, oh, yes, they do. High variation. And how about route origination validation, dropping invalids? Interestingly, Australia, through its major provider Telstra, have done this about a year ago. And so they show up quite well. Greenland, almost perfect. Sweden, big. Denmark, big. Africa, not so. South America, not so. So you see with these global views, there was so much diversity. But isn't this in everyone's interest? I'm like, V6 is meant to offer us a simpler, scalable, more secure, and in the long run, cheaper internet. Because if the Internet of Things is going to be anything with 100 billion or more devices connected to the internet, you're going to need V6. And for somehow over the last 20 years, it just isn't happened. And for some reason, you as network operators are more than happy not to do something that's simpler, more scalable, and more secure. Why? It's odd. Lying in the DNS is a problem. Bad people do lying in the DNS. DNSSEC was meant to stop this. It's been around for 10 years. Again, why do folk not do it? And routing mishaps happen every day. It's, not only an attack vector, it's an annoyance vector. Facebook, well, that was a routing mishap. It was an own goal, but it was a mishap. We see routing mishaps all the time. A huge leak from Nigeria turned off Google for parts of the world a few months ago. Route origination validation is meant to protect us from this stuff. It's been around for 5 years. Uptake is so low. You'd think your users and me, I'm a user, so are you. You'd think you'd want every ISP to do this because a safer, more secure internet's in everyone's interest. And as network service providers, you'd think that you'd want to provide that to your customers because that makes a happier customer with a more secure service. So what's the problem? I think part of the problem is that no one's telling us what to do anymore or when we should do it. It's up to each of us as individual network operators to figure it out. And we all see this very, very differently. Some folk see a competitive advantage in adopting early. They say, well, if I can boast of being the first V6 provider, in this case, it was Australia, that will win me some customers because they'll see I'm technologically advanced, I'm with it. Other folks say, well, it's inevitable I'm going to have to do this. I might as well do it today. And of course, this whole issue of security, safety, and utility, these more recent technologies improve the internet for everyone. But other folk don't see it that way. There's no doubt that V6 has its good and not so good features. It is a very old technology. It's 1980s technology, and it developed in the early 1990s. And quite frankly, the network that we're building, V6 is less relevant than it was 10 years ago. And so some folk are willing to wait. DNSSEC, well, it's only partially implemented. Resolvers check the answers, but end users don't. If we pushed DNSSEC validation all the way to these end devices, we're dead set scared the DNS will break, because pushing validation that far to the edge will probably kill the DNS. So it's only half an answer. And as for route origin validation, well, to be perfectly frank, it only makes attacks slightly harder, doesn't stop them. And more moving parts is always more fragile. So some folk are happy to wait. And we're going to sort of generalize this when we look at the internet, because as I said, no one's telling us what to do. This is a competitive marketplace, and each of you are independent players making up your own rules as you go along. There are many different versions of you all over the world, and they each have their own perspective. We're going to explore every space across these periods of transition, because we don't move in lockstep anymore. The telephone era is over. It's your call. It's your money, your call. Secondly, you no longer do long-term planning. It's all short-term. No one remembers the plans we had 5 years ago or 10 years. Long-term transitions get lost, and the internet keeps on changing. What we're doing now is not a transit network. The data centers are the most important part of the internet. Philip Smith's conversation about where are the Zoom data centers is the conversation we have about every single activity on the internet today. Dense deployment of data centers will completely redo the internet. And heaven help us, when Starlink get the picture and put data centers in low Earth orbit, orbiting above everybody. It will be, again, a completely different internet when that happens. And so there's no more transit. Landlocked countries have a different picture when data centers are close by. It's a totally different internet we're building against. So let's go back to Mongolia in the final couple of slides. Who's done what? Who's doing DNSSEC? AS55805, Mobicom, great work. And in fact, all those folk up to around about the academic and research network are doing a pretty good job with DNSSEC. Below that, you know who you are, not so good. Why? Well, you certainly run your own DNS. You don't outsource it to Google, except for GM MobileNet, AS58625, that sends all their queries to Google. They do it again up here as well. And our friends in the academic and research network are pretty keen on open DNS. Don't know why. Everyone else, though, runs their own DNS, and that's probably the reason why you've got a lot of DNSSEC. How about ROAs? Well, interestingly, whoever told you to sign ROAs, everyone lined up and signed them. Great job. Everyone does ROAs. Fantastic. Who drops invalid? Well, 4 of you, and they're listed here. A small one, iTools, 63962. Mobicom, absolutely. MobiNet, absolutely. I suspect they're the same provider. But the others, you're really not keen on it, are you? You've signed your rowers, but that's about all you do. And what about V6? Well, it's nowhere to be seen. I'm so sorry. There's nothing. And the question I'd like to leave you with, and for the panel later on, why is this so low? You're doing advanced technologies in routing, advanced technologies in DNS. V6, not so good. Thank you very much.